Welcome back. In this video we're going to try and talk a little bit about the gasoline you should be choosing to use in your chainsaw or almost any small power tool if it's two-stroke especially. And we also want to take some time to go over the additives that you should be adding into the fuel in order to make them run right. The most common thing that I've run into as to why one of these little power tools don't run very well is generally you've done something to the carburetor, you've done something with the fuel and the gas. A few years back the EPA mandated that the emissions had to be reduced quite a bit, and one of the ways that they dealt with that was to lean out the fuel mixture quite a bit. That creates some issues with lubrication of the cylinders, and it also, with the gas nowadays having ethanol in it, it becomes a real issue with quality of the gas and how well it runs. So we're going to start with a few of the particular additives that I would recommend you put in them. If you use these methods and you do use these products or something like them, I'm not trying to advertise specific products, but I think you'll find that your saw, your weed whacker, any of these sort of things like that, they will run so much better and they'll give you much better service over the life of the time that you have it, instead of after a few years they start to run terribly and they don't idle well and all these other problems that can happen. So the first thing is some form of a water remover for the fuel. To be honest with you, I don't recommend using these. Any kind of an alcohol type product, they're either isopropyl or I think this one is the isopropyl. You already have alcohol in the gasoline if you're buying the ethanol additives lately, so I wouldn't recommend you do this. This has a lower energy content than the petroleum and the gasoline. It's not really a good thing to be adding much of this with the gas. So I'd stay away from that. What I will talk about to begin with here is this is the oil that gets blended in with the gas. We happen to use a bunch of different ones. It doesn't always have to be this one. This is Echo. You can get this at Home Depot at a bunch of different places. The big thing that I would always recommend you do is you get a synthetic. If you use one of the conventional ones, which I'm not sure how many of those are out there, and certainly don't use engine oil. Once upon a time you could use motor oil and just mix it in. You don't really want to do that. Use a synthetic. They smoke a lot less. They'll put less carbon in the cylinder and on the plug, and your saw will run a lot better. Some of the marine ones, I used to use some of the marine mixes. Those are formulated to smoke as little as possible, and they generally burn really well. My experience has been they work really well with them. But these sort of things work really well here too. I don't know if you can see this as well on this. I'll try to get the light to kind of go on it. These particular type bottles will give you these little marks here that show you how much oil to squeeze up into there to add to a gallon of gas. I would recommend, for most people, they don't use an awful lot of mixed gas and oil at a time. Get like a 1 gallon gas container and just use it at that. It makes it easy to be able to figure out how to make your mix for the 50 to 1. And I won't, the writing on this is too small, but it talks about how much to add to get to 50 to 1 or 40 to 1, depending on whatever your ratio is that you need. But use a synthetic oil. And definitely, if you find one that is the marine ones, those are very good. Stable, or some sort of a fuel stabilizer. This is a must for these type of things. Unless you're burning the gas up really quick in a matter of weeks, I would always use this. The way we usually store gas is we get it in 5 gallon containers, and I put this sort of stuff in it in the beginning, right from the word go, and I put the other things in it, and this really works well at keeping the inside of your carburetor clean, keeps the varnish and the other sort of stuff that will build up inside the jets from doing that, and works really well, especially if you're going to be storing the gas for much of a season, which is what an awful lot of people do, because you have to be cutting or using quite a bit of it to go through a fair bit of the gas. So definitely use this on all small engines, lawnmowers and things like that, four-stroke as well. You really want to use this stuff. It's not that expensive. It really, really works well. One of the new things that's come out in the last few years are fuel conditioners that are designed to deal with the ethanol in the gas. The ethanol works as an oxidizer so that the emissions are a lot less. They used to use MBTE up here where we live, which was a chemical which evidently, unfortunately, turned out to be rather toxic. So now they have ethanol in it. It works well, I guess, for what it does, but the problem is it doesn't produce the same kind of power as gasoline alone. And the ethanol in the gas creates all kinds of problems with the carburetor and the jets, especially now that they're so leaned out to meet the emissions. This sort of stuff is very, very important to put in. Even if you are otherwise meticulous with your saw, and we'll be putting together a video at some point about how to get your saw ready to sit and store, either for the winter or if you cut once or twice a year and it's going to be sitting for a few months in between uses. And we'll put together some information about that. If you're going to have it sit for any length of time, and even if you are careful with the saw, you'll eventually have trouble with the idle and with it running, because the ethanol fuels are really, really tough on the carburetor. So enough said. I like Lucas products. They do a really good job. This particular product seems to work really well. We've had good luck with it, along with the Stable. I put it in addition. The Stable has something in it that talks about alcohol-induced water attraction and corrosion, that sort of thing. I don't know if you can read that on here, but it does talk about that. And Stable has a version of it which can be used for the ethanol alone. I like to use both. I'm a little overdoing it, I suppose. But if the carburetors get kind of schmutzed up and they don't work that well for you, they really don't run well, and the saw is miserable to work with. So they're not that expensive. You can treat a lot of gasoline with one of these things. I highly recommend it. The last thing I would recommend is some form of a cleaner. Again, I like Lucas products. You can use a number of different things. There are all kinds of different manufacturers that make this. This is essentially an injector cleaner or a fuel system cleaner. It works well to make sure that you keep the gas lines and the carburetor up and clean and running well. Again, I know it's a little bit of overkill, but I really would recommend it. These are systems that are going to have oil mixed in with the gas, and when that gas evaporates from the carburetor, if you let it sit and you don't empty the carburetor, and again, we'll talk about how to store your saw and whatnot at a later time, the gas and ethanol evaporates, but the oil is left, and it turns into a sludge. Part of what I'm going to recommend is that you empty out the gas out of the carburetor every time if you're done for an extended period of time. You're going to empty it out, and you're going to use these products in the gas while you're doing it, and the saw and these little engines will run so much better. Again, the main thing too, and last, is get yourself a 1 gallon gas tank. Mix up all of these things into here and do it 1 gallon at a time. That way you make sure that you're doing well with the synthetic oil. If you do all of these things, I sound like Pat Goss, don't I? If you do all of these things, your motor will run well, and you'll have really good luck with it. Tools are miserable if they don't run right. So take a little bit of time. For most people, it isn't an awful lot of gas, and it's important to do, and it'll let it run a lot better. Thanks again for watching, and if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comment line. I'd be happy to get back to you. And thanks again. We'll see you next time.